about university courses in England and Wales reached a record high for a fourth year running in 2022. The Office of the Independent Adjudicator (OIA) received 2,850 complaints, 3% more than in 2021, and 1,050,114 patents was awarded in compensation. There are about 2.5 million students in England, Wales and universities UK said most had positive experiences. Just under a quarter of the 2022 complaints related to the pandemic. That compared with more than a third of those that received in 2021, although COVID still appears to be having an impact. There was a rise in complaints relating to academic appeals after universities ended policies that protected students' grades from disruption. They made up 38% of the total, a rise from 29% in 2021. Complaints about service issues such as teaching also represented 38%, although this was down from 45% in 2021. Lydia Pennell, aged 22, left Manchester Metropolitan University after her first year of a fashion design course, which she began in September 2020. She told the BBC that most of the teaching was online, so she missed out on time using the facilities. I didn't make a single garment during my first year. I didn't know how to sew or how to use any of the machines in uni. In one online workshop, she said students were asked to use wine bottles instead of mannequins and dress them using paper and masking tape rather than fabric. Ms. Pennell complained to the OIA last year, having already complained to the university. None of the complaints were upheld. She said she was frustrated about the prospect of paying back her tuition fee loan for that year. It's disappointing to throw that much money away for an outcome that didn't exist at all. Manchester Metropolitan University said teaching took place online through national lockdowns and in-person sessions were available when restrictions were not in place. A spokesman said it provided a wide range of practical support for students to work from home, which included sewing machines for second and third year fashion students, as well as mini mannequins. Ms. Pennell is among students who are seeking compensation from universities through the student group claim over disruption to their education during COVID. Ryan Dunleavy of Harkers Parker, one of the law firms representing them, said some have now left university feeling thoroughly disappointed about the subpar service they received, which in no way reflected what they had been promised by their universities. Those who are still on courses at their universities tend to feed back to us that how they are being taught is still not up to the standard that they were promised. A quarter of complaints to the OIA in 2022 were classed as justified or partly justified, or were settled in favour of the student. A group of more than 400 students received £640,000 in compensation. The OIA report said the fact complaints related to academic appeals had risen in 2022 is likely to be because universities ended a no detriment or safety net policies, those aimed to protect students' grades from being negatively impacted when teaching moved online. Often the policies introduced for the 2020 and 2021 year meant students' grades were based on their performance up until the pandemic. Felicity Mitchell, independent adjudicator at the OIA, said 2022 was another difficult year for students and providers. We are seeing increasing levels of distress among students who are struggling to cope, and this is a major concern. At the same time, the pressures on providers make it more difficult for them to support students effectively. Universities will face soaring demand for places in the coming years, according to Admissions Service UCAS. The number of applicants could grow by 30% between 2022 and 2030, it said, reaching about 1 million by the start of the next decade. Strike action over pay, working conditions and pensions has been adding to pressure on universities in recent years. The OIA said only a small number of complaints related to industrial action last year. However, there has been much more action this year, with the university staff walking out again in February and March. A marking boycott has now started at more than 140 institutions, and further strike dates could be announced. A spokeswoman for Universities UK, which represents 140 institutions, said the OIA report helped universities know how and where to improve. She said most students had positive experiences, but that some dissatisfaction was inevitable. Tens of millions of pounds belonging to more than 80,000 Tens of millions of pounds belonging to about 80,000 young people without capacity to make financial decisions could be locked in trust funds, as the report suggests. Those families must go through court to access the savings when accounts mature, a process which can take months and cost hundreds of pounds. Only 15 accounts were accessed this way in 2021. The government says it is unable to share more recent figures. It says it is trying to speed up cases. One mum told BBC News she wishes she had never gone through the hugely stressful process and has advised others against it. Michelle Creed's dining room table is covered in documents as she takes them through the year-long process of accessing her daughter Alana's savings account. I just can't believe I've had to do all this just to access the birthday money, Christmas money and other savings we've been putting away for her. Like the millions of others born between 2002 and 2011, Alana was given between £250 and £500 through the then Labour government's Child Trust Fund scheme. Families could then add their own contributions to help the savings pot grow. Alana now has £7,500 in her account. The 19-year-old has severe learning disabilities and lacks the capacity to make financial decisions. So instead of being able to withdraw the money when she turned 18, like most of her peers, her family have had to spend nearly £750 going through the court of protection. Michelle says it was so complicated she had to go through the court process twice, costing £371 in fees each time, to make sure both she and her husband could access her daughter's savings. It took a year in total. It's so frustrating. Her older sister was just able to get her money without a problem. But with Alana, there was this huge block that we had to fight to get past, Michelle says. Michelle is one of the few parents who has managed to withdraw her daughter's money through the Court of Protection. Ministry of Justice MOJ figures show only 15 accounts were accessed through the court process in 2021. Michelle wishes she had never started the long, bureaucratic and expensive process to get Alana her money, and advises other families who may be about to go through court to think twice. If you can leave the money where it is and hopefully things will change one day, I would do that because it changes everything. When a parent or carer is granted access to their child's savings, the Court of Protection makes them a deputy of the child's financial affairs. This means Michelle now has a lifelong legal duty to account for every penny she spends of her daughter's money. She says the ongoing scrutiny feels like a slur on her character, pointing to her pile of receipts and spreadsheets, which are evidence of how she is spending Alana's benefits and savings. For many years I have now been trusted to manage Alana's disability benefits as her appointee. But now, because I've had to become a deputy, I'm not trusted to manage her money, she says. Alana loves going to Cafe Nero, so Michelle sometimes spends £100 a month on going for coffees with her. It's her favourite thing to do, and now I feel like I've got to justify it. A report by Renaissance Legal, a firm that supports families through the process, seen exclusively by BBC News, suggests there are more than 80,000 accounts that cannot be accessed without going through the Court of Protection. By 2029, the year in which all of these accounts will have matured, there could have been up to £210 million blocked and locked away in child trust funds that families have been unable to access. Philip Watford, the firm's managing director, says in some cases young people have £75,000 worth of savings effectively locked away. Many of these families are fighting on all fronts for the right education for their children, for the right amount in benefits, for better healthcare, and now they're fighting to get their own money back, he says. The financial risk posed by these families is zero. It's their money in the first place. Laura Williams has been adding money to her 17-year-old son's account since he was born, but she has decided not to apply it to access Joel's savings of £6,000 because she doesn't want to face the ordeal of the court case and becoming a deputy. Joel has Milan syndrome, a rare chromosomal condition, and does not have capacity to make any decisions about his finances. Laura transferred his child trust fund into a junior ISA several years ago, but the same rules around accessing the money apply. It's so unfair. Just because my child has a disability, he is going to be the one to suffer. Lord Blunkett told the BBC that mistakes were made by the Labour government that set up child trust funds. He says he and his colleagues did not foresee how the Mental Capacity Act would make it difficult for families to access the money. But now we need to get a bit of common sense into the issue, he adds. These families are trusted to handle their children's benefits, government money, by the Department of Work and Pensions. they can be trusted with their own savings. The Ministry of Justice (MOJ) has previously considered proposals to change the process so families would not have to go to court, but in February, after a year-long consultation, it decided to keep the process as it is in order to protect against fraud and abuse. The MOJ says it is simplifying the system to speed up the process. It added that most families who apply would get their fees waived, but for some, if the account has more than £3,000, then it would be decided on a case-by-case basis. When Michelle went through the process last year, she was told that she would have to pay the court fees. Surrounded by her piles of receipts, she says becoming Alana's deputy has been hugely detrimental to their lives. Alana's savings was supposed to be something positive, but instead what's come out of it is a life of feeling like we are being watched by Big Brother. An independent organisation should be brought in to help broker a deal in the pay dispute between junior doctors and the government, medical leaders say. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, which brings together leading doctors and surgeons, said prolonged industrial action was having a serious impact. Last week's strike by junior doctors in England resulted in nearly 200,000 cancelled appointments and operations. The Department of Health said it would not involve a third party. Calls for a 35% pay rise by junior doctors are unreasonable, but ministers would engage constructively, the government said. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges said a conciliation service like ACAS was needed for the sake of patients. Its chair, Professor Dame Helen Stokes-Lampard, told the BBC's Today programme, "I'm gravely concerned. Patients are suffering, the doctors are suffering too, it needs to be brought to a conclusion. Before you can even start to have negotiations, you have to have preliminary talks, and those are not yet happening," she warns. The Academy helped broker a deal between junior doctors and the government in their last dispute in 2016, which was over the introduction of a new contract. It says it now has concerns about both a lack of a solution in the current pay deal and the anticipated impact on services and patients that will potentially follow any future action. The intervention of the Academy is potentially highly significant. It brings together the most senior figures in the medical profession and usually stays out political debates around health. The Academy statement stresses that it will not comment on the details of the junior doctor's pay claim or terms and conditions of employment, but it notes concerns and frustration of doctors and intense workload pressures. The British Medical Association, BMA, which represents junior doctors, said it had already reached out to ACAS and suggested the Academy's intervention would put more pressure on the government to do the same. The BMA said it believes working with the conciliation service gives the most realistic chance of ending the strike. It came after the NHS Confederation, the body representing NHS Health Service Trust, had suggested that ACAS should be involved. Labour this week also urged the Health Secretary to swallow his pride and call in the service to mediate an end to the dispute. ACAS, which receives funding from the government, can play an impartial role in helping to settle matters when there is a disagreement between an employer and group of employees. Recently, it has been involved in mediation relating to the Royal Mail and higher education industrial disputes. Junior doctors, which include medical school graduates, to those with many years' experience on the front line, represent 40% of the medical workforce. They are asking for a 35% pay rise, arguing that their pay has been cut by 26% since 2008, once inflation is taken into account. But the government has said the pay demand is unreasonable in the current economic context. More than 196,000 hospital appointments and about 20,000 operations and treatments had to be cancelled because of the most recent strike. It was the greatest number of cancellations so far in the NHS pay dispute, which has also involved nurses, hospital staff, ambulance workers and physios. It brings the total number of appointments affected by all the strikes over the past 5 months to more than 500,000. Dr. Adrian Boyle, the president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, RCEM, described the current situation in emergency services as really tough. The president of the RCEM, which monitors standards of care in UK A&E departments, said there was not enough hospitals and called for capacity to be increased. The vast majority of problems have been caused by deep underlying issues rather than strikes, he told BBC Radio's For Today programme. Government sources are maintaining their line that the BMA needs to rail back significantly on their wage claim. The Department of Health said the Health and Social Care Secretary has been clear his door is open and he remains willing to engage constructively, but a 35% pay rise, which would involve some junior doctors receiving £20,000, is unreasonable. Strike action also needs to be paused for formal talks to begin. Ofsted was warned on more than 100 occasions about incidents at children's homes whose residents faced horrific abuse, a report has revealed. An expert panel criticised inadequate leadership at the Hesley Group, which ran the homes, as well as failures of regulation. The review said a major overhaul of the safeguarding system was needed. BBC News revealed children were reportedly punched, kicked and fed chilies at homes Ofsted rated good. In January, BBC News revealed how more than 100 reports of appalling abuse and neglect between 2018 and 2021 were uncovered at 3 sites, which are all now closed. The homes were run by the Hesley Group. The allegations included naked children being locked outside in freezing temperatures and having vinegar poured on cuts. BBC News has also revealed Ofsted had been warned at least 40 times about incidents. Its chief inspector told them she was very deeply sorry, but blamed a great failure of integrity by Hesley managers to report abuse. This month, the BBC found the Hesley Group also failed to prevent vulnerable young adults being harmed. A council investigation found 99 cases of abuse at a Doncaster home for vulnerable adults in 2010. One worker even ordered a taser to use there, although the device was never delivered. Hesley continues to run a school and placements for vulnerable adults. The latest report by an expert on safeguarding panel examined how the system failed to protect children in the company's care. It found Ofsted received 108 reports of serious incidents at the homes and that 232 referrals were received by Doncaster Council's safeguarding lead, known as the LADO. Whistleblowers shared concerns with authorities on 20 occasions. The review also made recommendations about what changes should be made to better protect the 1,700 children with disabilities and complex health needs living in residential special schools registered as children's homes. These include asking Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, which regulates health settings, to jointly inspect sites, and the government to develop a strategy for workforce standards and training. Dr. Susan Tranter, who led the review, said the abuse could happen again elsewhere without changes being made. There was failure at every level of the regulatory and safeguarding system, and the leadership and management of these settings was woefully inadequate. In a statement, the Hesley Group said it recognised that serious failings in the running of the homes had been identified. It said that it had closed the homes and made significant changes across management teams. It added, "We are committed to working with Ofsted, the Care Quality Commission and other relevant authorities to ensure people in our care can achieve their full potential." The Children's Homes Association, the membership body for providers, welcomed the report's recognition of the need to tackle what it called a workforce crisis in residential childcare. It said it was sad and frustrating that the government had not invested in the supply of staff like it has with foster care and adult homes. This is a political choice, and we believe these highly vulnerable children deserve better. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has repeatedly refused to be interviewed about the abuse in the Hesley homes. In a statement, she said the Department for Education had received assurances that all local authorities have reviewed the safety and well-being of children placed in similar homes. She said the government will continue to work closely with the sector to make sure that children are not only safe, but fulfilling their potential. The safety of a ward accused of failing children has been rated as inadequate by inspectors. The care regulator warned Kettering General Hospital, KGH, in Northamptonshire over its children's and young people services. Inspectors' worries include sepsis treatment, staff numbers, dirt levels, and not having an open culture, where concerns can be raised without fear. The Trust Chief Executive apologised to those who felt let down. Since the BBC's first report in February, highlighting the concerns of parents with children who died or became seriously ill at KGH, dozens more families have come forward, bringing the number to 50 to date. Michaela Stevens told the BBC she contacted the Care Quality Commission, CQC, over complaints about her son Archie's care on Skylark Paediatric Ward in November. She believed her then 17-month-old son, who lost 500 grams or 1.1 pounds on Skylark, was lucky to be alive. In December, the CQC inspected the Paediatric Assessment Unit, Skylark Ward, and the Neonatal Unit after hearing concerns of safety and rated the service inadequate, the lowest possible. Inspectors found that staff did not always effectively identify and quickly act upon patients at risk of deterioration. They said there were sometimes delays in medical reviews being undertaken outside of normal working hours, highlighting one case where a seemingly deteriorated patient was not seen until 3 hours after being escalated to the on-call team. Charlotte Rudge, CQC Deputy Director of Operations in the Midlands, said inspectors found the Trust had ineffective systems in place to assess and treat people at risk of sepsis. We were informed of an incident where someone who developed sepsis hadn't had a sepsis screen for over 7 hours after arrival at the hospital, which is totally unacceptable. The report said the paediatric sepsis lead role had been vacant for 8 months at the time of the inspection. Other findings included inspectors were concerned about a potential risk of missing a child who needed to be safeguarded because records did not correlate. There were not enough nursing or medical staff, with key nursing leadership positions being vacant. Wards were not always clean, including a significant amount of brown dirt on bathroom doors, dirt in shower areas and behind toilets, and dust on cot rails. There was not always an open culture where patients, their families and staff could raise concerns without fear. The CQC said some issues raised by them in 2017 remained, including concerns about paediatric life support, training levels, and other governance. Leaders did not have a robust oversight of the service at the time of our inspection to ensure the service was being effectively managed, inspectors said. We found limited progress had been made to improve the quality and safety of the service. The CQC issued a warning notice to make improvements on multiple areas, including medicines management, identification and treatment of sepsis, safeguarding processes, and learning from serious incidents. Olivia's story. Olivia was born with a cyst on her neck which obstructed her breathing, and after having it removed at Great Ormond Street Hospital, GOSH, she was transferred to KGH. Her parents, Lee Dooley and Leslie Fishwick from Corby, said Skylark did not change her breathing tube, which is due to be changed weekly during her 7-week stay. Meanwhile, they said Olivia's condition started to worsen and she started vomiting. Her parents said they signed a consent form before the breathing tube was eventually removed on the 28th of March. But that day, Olivia went into cardiac arrest and her parents were told she stopped breathing for between 7 and 14 minutes. She was eventually revived with assistance from doctors from Nottingham, but has since become unresponsive, according to her parents, and is being cared for at Great Ormond Street. Miss Fishwick said Skylark staff were just not interested in getting the breathing tube changed, adding it was like banging your head against a brick wall. They just wouldn't listen. Her partner added she's not going back to Kettering, not happening. Great Ormond Street said that as well. They said they wouldn't send her back there, she's not safe there. The hospital said it was unable to comment on individual cases. During the inspection, the CQC also visited the Paediatric Emergency Department, PED, rating that service as requiring improvement, and stated the service did not have vision for what it wanted to achieve. The Trust Chief Executive, Deborah Needham, said, "We accept findings of the CQC report and the clear message it contains of the people to significantly improve the way we deliver children and young people's services. I would like to sincerely apologise to any families who feel they have been let down by our services." Immediately after the CQC's inspection in December, we launched a comprehensive improvement programme to look at the issues raised and decide how we can resolve them. The hospital said it had increased staff training around sepsis, given additional focus to identifying deterioration, and recruited more staff, including a new head of nursing. The Trust's new Director of Nursing, Jane Skippen, along with its new Medical Director, are leading the improvement programme. Ms Skippen said the CQC found we have not always embedded improvements to our systems and processes, and that is a major concern for us and an area we will continue to focus on. We are improving the way we oversee changes and how we assure ourselves that changes have been effective. We want to work with our staff, our patients and their families to develop good communication and a strong culture where safety comes first. The Home Secretary is expected to be given the ability to ignore attempts by European judges to halt migrant deportations from the UK. The change will be made to the illegal migration bill after the government made concessions to Conservative MPs. The move should avoid a rebellion from some MPs who have been demanding tougher action against the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR. The change will be made in amendments when the bill returns to the Commons. As part of the amendment, Home Secretary Suella Braverman is expected to gain the power, in certain circumstances, to ignore interim injunctions from the court known as Rule 39 orders that halt deportation flights. The Strasbourg-based court, unpopular with the Tory right, used an injunction of this type to block the removal of migrants to Rwanda last year. Rebel Tory MPs say they have also agreed with ministers that British judges will only be able to halt deportations where there is a risk of serious and irreversible harm. BBC Newsnight has been told some movement is also expected on the provision of safe and legal routes for refugees to come to the UK, which is a key demand of another group of Conservative MPs. The migration legislation, which was set out by Ms Braverman last month, would prevent anyone entering the UK illegally from claiming asylum. It is central to Mr Sunak's pledge to stop small boats crossing the English Channel, but has provoked outrage among charities and opposition parties who say it breaches international law. Some Conservative MPs, however, believe it does not go far enough and table a series of changes to the bill. Last month, some of those MPs withdrew their proposals in Parliament after Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said he would engage with those who have concerns. Conservative MP Danny Kruger, who was among those leading the calls, said he was grateful to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary for their work. Mr Kruger said the British public are fed up with London lawyers and Strasbourg judges getting in the way of a sensible migration policy. He said he was hopeful that the government will be able to deliver the prompt removals to Rwanda and other safe countries. This was needed, he said, to stop the boats and lay the foundation of a fair and humane asylum system. More than 45,000 people entered the UK via channel crossings last year, up from about 300 in 2018. Under the new bill, people removed from the UK would be blocked from returning or seeking British citizenship in future. Migrants will not get bail or be able to seek judicial review for the first 28 days of detention. It will also take place a legal duty on the Home Secretary to detain and remove those arriving in the UK illegally to Rwanda or a safe third country. This will take legal precedence over someone's right to claim asylum. In a letter to MPs following a publication of the bill, Ms Braverman conceded there is a more than 50% chance the bill is incompatible with international law. It is expected to come up against opposition in the House of Lords and subsequently expected to face a wave of legal challenges, whilst opposition parties have dismissed it as unworkable. Former Lord Chief Justice and crossbench peer Lord Thomas said ignoring interim injunctions from the ECHR would be an immensely serious step and warned it sets an extraordinarily bad example. Many people would say having the power to ignore a court order is something unless the circumstances were quite extraordinary. This is a step a government should never take because it is symbolic of a breach of the rule of law. Detectives are appealing for potential victims of a rapist taxi driver to come forward after he was jailed for 12 years for attacking two disabled women. Derek Bilby, aged 64, was working in Doncaster when he met and groomed his victims before sexually abusing them in their own homes. South Yorkshire Police said they could not rule out the possibility there may be also some other victims. Bilby of Alexander Street in Bentley admitted 6 offences including rape. Police said Bilby built up a relationship with the 2 women, who officers described as having significant disabilities, after picking them up in his taxi, visiting them in their homes and attacking them over a 2-year period. He was charged in May 2022 and convicted in October of the same year after both women gave accounts of his actions, the force said. Investigating officer Alex Story said both of these women have significant long-term vulnerabilities and are practically housebound. Bilby took advantage of this, coercing his way inside their homes before forcing himself on them on multiple occasions. It's sickening to know that both women felt they could trust him, and he was quick to take advantage of this. Praising the victims for their bravery in reporting Bilby, he urged anyone who had information about possible further attacks, to contact police. We can't rule out that Bilby targeted other women when he worked as a taxi driver in Doncaster a number of years ago, and I would urge anyone with concerns or suspicions to come forward, he said. Bilby was sentenced to jail on Tuesday at Sheffield Crown Court. As well as his jail sentence, Bilby will serve 6 years on extended licence and will also be added to the Sex Offenders Register for life. The Scottish Government has published its legal arguments in its bid to overturn a UK Government block on gender reform legislation. In its 22-page petition to the Court of Session, it argues that concerns raised by Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack are irrational. It said that there was an absence of any supporting evidence for his claims. Mr Jack used a Section 35 order to ensure the new law passed by MSPs in December could not be enacted. He said that the law would have a detrimental impact on areas that are reserved to Westminster, such as equalities protections for women and girls. Mr Jack previously told the Commons the reforms would have an adverse impact on single-sex clubs, associations and schools and protections such as equal pay. He said having different processes across the UK would create significant complications and could lead to more fraudulent or bad faith applications. The Scottish Government has challenged the Section 35 order on 4 counts: that Mr Jack made a material error of law, that his concerns about the safeguards in the bill were irrelevant to the order's making, and that his reasons were inadequate, which would make the order unlawful. The reforms in the Gender Recognition Bill are intended to make it easier for trans people to change their legally recognised sex. The bill would lower the age that people can apply for a Gender Recognition Certificate, GRC, a legal document confirming a gender change, from 18 to 16. It would also remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, with applicants only needing to have lived as their acquired gender for 3 months rather than 2 years, or 6 months if they are aged 16 or 17. Trans campaigners welcome the bill. However, critics of the plans are worried that allowing anyone to self-identify as a woman could impact on women's rights and access to single-sex spaces like refuges and changing rooms. The bill was passed by 86 votes to 39 in the Scottish Parliament, but it has caused deep divisions with the SNP, with Ash Regan, a candidate in the recent party leadership contest, quitting as a minister in the run-up to the vote. Kate Forbes, who also stood for the leadership, was on maternity leave when the vote took place, but later she said she would not have backed the bill in its current form. Both Miss Regan and Miss Forbes have said they would not have wanted to challenge the bloc in the courts if they had won the leadership, and there have been warnings from some within the party, including Miss Regan, that the government stands little chance of winning the case. Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon called the decision to block the bill a full frontal attack on the Scottish Parliament and vowed to oppose it before her resignation earlier this year. New First Minister Hamza Yusuf vowed to challenge the Section 35 order, saying it was an undemocratic veto over legislation that was passed by a majority of the Scottish Parliament. In its petition to the Court of Session, lawyers for the Scottish Government said, having regard to the absence of any supporting evidence, produced by the Secretary of State and in the context of research, consultation and comparative information available to and considered by the Scottish Parliament during the bill's passage, the Secretary of State's concerns about the operation of the bill are irrational. The lawyers also said the 3 criteria for making such an order had not been met. These criteria are that the bill impacts on reserved matters, that Mr Jack has reasonable grounds to believe it would impact on the operation of reserved laws, and that the Scottish Secretary must provide adequate reasons for the block. The petition was released in the hours after Social Justice Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville made a statement to MSPs telling them the government had no option but to challenge the order and claiming it was a bid to protect democracy. A spokeswoman for the UK government said it would robustly defend the decision to prevent the Scottish Government's Gender Recognition Reform Bill from becoming law. The Scottish Secretary made the order under Section 35 of the Scotland Act 1998 after thorough and careful consideration of all the relevant advice and the policy implications, she said. He was very clear in the accompanying statement of reasons how the bill would have an adverse effect on reserved matters, included on the operation of the law as it applies to Great Britain-wide equalities protections. Women as young as 30 in Northern Ireland are having to undergo extreme treatments, including hysterectomies, to deal with severe psychological symptoms linked to their periods. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder (PMDD) affects 3 to 8% of women of reproductive age. A doctor has said 30% of those diagnosed have attempted suicide. 2 women told BBC News Northern Ireland their premenstrual symptoms were so debilitating they wanted to die. Dr. Frances Stewart, a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist, said 86% of those diagnosed will have had suicidal thoughts. She said she sees women who describe a rip-roaring rage that they can't control ahead of menstruation. However, she said that after their period they recognise themselves again, with those around them describing it as living with 2 different people. For some, the only way to handle it and to protect everyone around them is to almost lock themselves in a room until they get through the spell, she said. That is because they are afraid of what they could do either to themselves or those around them. Dr. Stewart said some of those women are having to make life-changing decisions about having their ovaries, wombs and fallopian tubes removed to manage their premenstrual symptoms. Samantha Campbell, aged 32, contemplated taking her own life when symptoms became overwhelming. I felt everyone around me was just better off without me. I didn't want to burden my family. I felt an urge not to live. Samantha, who lives in County Down, has been diagnosed with PMDD. 1 week before her period, Samantha said she would isolate, including staying alone in her room to protect herself and family. If I snapped at others around me or was angry towards them, which is a symptom, I would then hurt myself. I self-harmed either by cutting myself or by overeating. Samantha has since had her ovaries removed, which helps to balance hormones, but that surgery triggers menopause. She is also planning to have a hysterectomy. What is PMDD? PMDD was recognised as a medical condition by the World Health Organization in 2019, and is also recognised by the NHS. Women experience extreme psychological upset for 2 weeks prior to their period, and once their period comes, the symptoms subside. It is not clear why some women experience worse symptoms than others. Health professionals believe it could be genetic, or for some, their central nervous system is particularly sensitive to hormonal changes or find coping with stress very difficult. Symptoms can include cramps, headaches, and joint and muscle pain. Behavioural symptoms such as binge eating and problems sleeping. Mental and emotional symptoms such as feeling very anxious, angry, depressed, or even suicidal. Jennifer Messett, aged 39, lives in Dublin, and at her worst, said she had suicide ideations, feelings of worthlessness, and every 2 weeks just wanted to kill myself. She said she's at the more extreme end of the spectrum and had to travel to London to get a diagnosis. However, she feels lucky that before having a hysterectomy, she had a son. When all is said and done and your friends and family are going on to have children, it does hurt the heart a lot. "I am a good mum and I would have been a great mum to more than one," Jennifer said. Dr. Stewart said making life-changing decisions around fertility at such an early age can be agonising, but it is about choosing a quality of life. Women describe themselves as two different people throughout their cycle. Once ovulation happens, these women are extremely sensitive to the changes in their hormones, and their ability to deal with quality of life plummets. However, she said the positive news is PMDD can be treated once diagnosed, which is critical. But it was key that a patient completed a questionnaire in order to receive a proper diagnosis. PMDD can be treated by either shutting down the ovaries by injection, which stops the hormones being released, or removing the ovaries. Dr. Stewart said the cure is the removal of ovaries and the womb, although that is extreme. The satisfaction rates from the literature and from a personal level are extremely high, she said. "We are seeing more people who are recognising it, but that is because it is an internationally recognised disease. It has the classification through the World Health Organization, so therefore it is something that is recognised." A new phone line has opened as part of an investigation into the misconduct of former BBC DJ Tim Westwood. Anyone with concerns about Westwood's sexual conduct and the BBC's knowledge of it can share their experiences confidentially and anonymously. BBC News has reported multiple allegations of sexual misconduct against Mr. Westwood by women who say he abused his position to exploit them. The former presenter for Radio 1 and 1 Extra denies the claims. In August last year, the BBC appointment Gemma White KC to lead an independent review into what was known about Mr. Westwood's conduct during his time at the corporation. The new telephone line will be in operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 weeks. Callers will be put in contact with Miss White or Janine Davis, an independent safeguarding expert, who is also leading the independent review. "We know that it's not easy to come forward," Miss Davis says. "We want to make certain that those who want to do so can speak directly to someone who has experience and expertise of these sensitive matters." The phone line will be open from Thursday the 20th of April to Friday the 19th of May 2023 on 08000 121 838. Alternatively, people are able to email them. Evidence can also be given as confidential and anonymous. In a joint investigation by BBC News and The Guardian, 65-year-old Tim Westwood was accused of predatory and unwanted sexual behaviour and touching in incidents between 1992 and 2017. Some of the women said they encountered Mr. Westwood when they were under 18. One says that she was only 14 when Mr. Westwood first had sex with her. A total of 18 women had detailed their stories to BBC News. In August 2022, an external inquiry into what the corporation did and did not know about Mr. Westwood's conduct during his nearly 20 years working there was launched. The review's findings are expected to be presented in late June or early July 2023. Last week, the Metropolitan Police confirmed officers had spoken to a 65-year-old man under caution twice this year for non-recent sexual offences. There has been no arrest. The DJ joined Capital Extra in 2013 after leaving the BBC. Last April, he stepped down from the show until further notice after the allegations against him were publicised. A former Radio 1 DJ jailed for child sex offences was caught partly by matching a smart speaker audio to his distinctive voice, it has emerged. Mark Page was jailed for arranging sexual abuse of children in the Philippines, both online and in person. Data from Google Takeout was used for the first time during the 2-year investigation by Cleveland police. Officers who worked on the case have now won a Home Office Internet Intelligence Award. Page, previously of Ingleby Barwick Teesside, was found guilty in March 2022 of 4 charges of arranging the commission of a child sex offence. The divorced father of 3 was convicted at the age of 63 of 2 counts of abuse by using a webcam linking his home to the Philippines in 2016, and 2 more offences while visiting the country in 2016 and 2019. Page visited the Philippines regularly for business as managing director of Armed Forces radio station Garrison FM. Teesside Crown Court heard he tried to haggle down the price for a sexual encounter with a 12-year-old girl and a boy of 13. His initial sentence of 12 years was increased to 18 years under the unduly lenient sentence scheme. Page was on Radio 1 in the 1980s and worked as Middlesbrough FC's stadium announcer for 20 years. Officers from Cleveland Police were given the award at the Home Officers International Digital Investigation Awards. During the investigation, a computer in Page's office was logged into a Google account, which allowed the team to take over the account and access the archive. At the time, the national understanding about cloud data was still in its early stages, the force said. This archive provided a comprehensive picture of Page's life, spanning devices used over a decade, which showed he was geographically, photographically and financially linked to key locations where he committed his crimes, said Detective Sergeant Kevin Carter. The data also included Hey Google voice recordings made by Page, which linked his distinctive radio voice to crimes he was committing with his victims overseas. Investigators identified 3 victims of exploitation in the Philippines who had been trafficked based on the data. Detective Superintendent Anne Marie Selby, head of Major Serious and Organised Crime, called it a complex investigation and praised her team's work. Most importantly, it has prevented further children from being exploited by Page, she added. An Afghan interpreter who worked for the British Army has been denied compensation from the government after he was shot twice by the Taliban. Jamal Barak, who moved to Coventry, was with the army for 8 years. The Ministry of Defence (MOD) said it had paid out more than £3.3 million to Afghans injured as a result of their employment with the military, but Mr Barak was told he was not eligible for compensation. The MOD said all claims were assessed by medical and legal experts. Mr Barak was 17 when he first started working with the army as an interpreter and served from 2008 to 2015. He said he was shot twice, once in the chest and again in the back, while he worked with the Scots Guards in Helmand Province. Although he has difficulty walking, been left unable to work and requires daily pain relief, he was told he was ineligible for government compensation. He said he felt so disappointed to be denied compensation for his injuries. All the reasons they gave to me was that you have to be significantly of impairment or disability. They want us to be fully disabled people. We should have lost our legs, our hands, then they'd be able to pay us the money. The MOD's guidance states payments are not intended for people expected to recover or where they may be left with some permanent or long-lasting impairment of a less serious nature, for example limited in either the degree of pain or loss of faculty. While it was unable to comment on individual cases, a spokesperson said it was committed to awarding appropriate ex gratia medical payments to those brave people who worked alongside our soldiers on patrol. If it received sufficient evidence, cases could be reassessed if the victim's condition worsened, the MOD added. I'm urging the government to change the criteria, Mr Barak said, adding he would consider legal action if his case was not reconsidered. At least 78 people have been killed in a crash at a school in the Yemeni capital Sana'a during a distribution of charity for Ramadan, officials have said. The TV footage shows a crowd of people unable to move and many in distress in the Bab al-Yemen area of the city. Hundreds of people reportedly crowded into the school late on Wednesday to receive donations amounting to about $9, £7 or €8 per person. The rebel Houthi movement has controlled Sana'a since 2015. Videos posted on social media shows people screaming with dozens of bodies on the ground, some of which are not moving. Other people are seen trying to help. 2 local businessmen who arranged the event had been arrested and an investigation was underway, the Interior Ministry said. A spokesman for the ministry blamed the crash on the random distribution of funds without coordination with local officials. Many people who were also injured, with 13 in a critical condition, a health official in Sana'a said. Women and children were among the dead, a Houthi security official told AFP news agency on the condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to journalists. The Associated Press news agency quoted 2 eyewitnesses who said Houthi fighters had fired into the air in an attempt at crowd control, apparently striking an electrical wire which resulted in an explosion. This caused panic that led to the crash, they added. The rebels are said to have then sealed off the school and barred people, including journalists, from approaching. The Houthis have reportedly agreed to pay $2,000 or £1,600 to each family who lost a relative, while the injured would get around $400 or £322. Yemen has been devastated by a conflict that escalated in 2015 when the Houthis seized large parts of the country and a Saudi-led coalition intervened in support of the Yemeni government. More than 150,000 people have died in the conflict, which has widely been seen as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. More than 23 million people, 3/4 of the population, are in need of some form of aid, and Yemen's internationally recognized government is now based in Aden. The event happened during the final days of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Last week, a major prisoner swap between warring sides in Yemen started, seen as part of stepped-up efforts to end the devastating 8-year conflict. Mohammed Ali al-Southi, head of the Houthis' Supreme Revolutionary Committee, blamed Wednesday's crash on the country's humanitarian crisis. "We hold the countries of aggression responsible for what happened and for the bitter reality that the Yemeni people live in because of the aggression and blockade," he said on Twitter. K-pop star Moonbin has died at the age of 25, his record label has announced. He was found unresponsive by his manager at his apartment in Seoul on Wednesday last night. South Korean media quoted police as saying he appears to have taken his own life, but an autopsy is being reviewed to determine the exact cause of the death. Moonbin unexpectedly left our world and became a star in the sky, a tribute from his label Fantiago said. He entered showbiz as a child actor and model in the 2000s. He had his acting debut in 2009, when as an 11-year-old he starred in the popular Korean drama series Boys Over Flowers. At age 18, he joined the popular boy band Astro in 2016. With a career that spanned his entire life, Moonbin is in a rare group of K-pop stars. While his international appeal is not on the level of BTS or Blackpink, he's widely popular at home, Rob Swartz, an Asia correspondent for Billboard magazine, told the BBC. He added that K-pop idols are under intense pressure from fans on social media to look and sound perfect, while record producers demand that they churn out hit after hit. "It's crazy how they have these guys under a microscope," he said. "Certainly stars in the West can more or less keep who they're dating a secret. In the K-pop world, it's impossible to keep a secret. Every time they lift a foot, thousands of lines are written about it." He also noted that Moonbin went on hiatus in 2019 and 2020, citing his health. K-pop artists don't really have a life outside being a pop star. They start training at a very young age. They don't go to school or make regular friends. It's really hard for them to see life outside the K-pop world. Since 2020, Moonbin had been performing with another Astro member, Sanha, in a duo. Moonbin and Sanha had been in the middle of a world tour, and the last performance was in Bangkok on the 8th of April. The label Fantiago said all of Astro's members were returning to Seoul on Thursday together for Moonbin's wake. The statement from the label also asked people to refrain from speculative and malicious reports so that Moonbin's family could pay their respects in peace. Moonbin's sister Moon Sua is also a K-pop singer, part of the girl group Billy. The siblings had previously spoken in public interviews about their dependence on each other. South Korea has the highest rate of young suicide among developed countries. While its overall suicide rate is falling, deaths of those in their 20s are rising. The K-pop industry alone has seen 4 suicides in recent years. Singer and actress Gu Hara was found dead at home in Seoul in 2019. Her close friend, K-pop star Sulli, killed herself after a long struggle with online bullying in the same year. In 2018, Minwoo of boy band 100% died at home, with his label only saying he had suffered cardiac arrest. Jonghyun, the lead singer of SHINee, one of South Korea's biggest boy bands, died in 2017. Moonbin joined the Fantiago's trainee program as a child before eventually joining Astro. The group was originally 6 performers, but 1 member left in February 2023. Astro fans, known as Arohas, have been mourning Moonbin's death. Known as an all-round performer, he had been seen as the boy band's most celebrated dancer. Pictures on social media showed fans on Wednesday night laying flowers and post-it notes at impromptu street memorials in South Korea. Fans also strung up purple and silver balloons, colours that had featured prominently at the singer's last performance in Thailand. At a recent concert while on the Diffusion tour with Sanha to promote the duo's latest EP record, Moonbin told fans that he had been going through a difficult time. Korean broadcaster SBS reported, "I want to confess one thing. I'm actually feeling really bad. There might have been a lot of signs from which people could notice since the concert started, so I'm also very sorry to you guys. I'm working out and trying to pick up things that I've left little by little. I choose this job, so I need to be happy so that I can make fans happy as well," he said in a live broadcast over social media. The duo was set to perform in Macau this Saturday, followed by Indonesia and Japan in May. Ongoing fighting in Sudan's capital is now severely affecting food supplies as well as disrupting access to water and electricity, according to Khartoum residents who spoke to the BBC. "We only have enough food for 2 days," Nisreen Al-Saim said. Ms. Saim added that she and her family were now reducing the amount of food they consume in the hope that their supplies last longer. Water and electricity cuts have affected many Sudanese homes since clashes began between the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) paramilitary group and the Sudanese army on the 15th of April. The two sides have been sharing power, with the head of the army, Gen Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, as de facto leader, and the head of the RSF, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, as his deputy, but they have since started fighting each other. More than 270 people had died, according to a statement from the US Embassy in Khartoum. In Bouri, northern Khartoum, eyewitnesses told the BBC that the main water pumping station has been hit. Hind, a local resident, said the frequent water outages forced her and her family to rely solely on their reserves of abri, a corn-based drink usually consumed during Ramadan, to quench their thirst. Hind added that all the shops in her neighbourhood had closed except for some bakeries, and even they had little flour left. A few days before the fighting started, the army had warned civilians to stockpile food following the deployment of RSF personnel to different points of the capital. But Hiba, another Khartoum resident, told the BBC that only a few families took the advice seriously, as no one imagined that the situation would escalate to the current extent. "We did not want to go out in the heats, as we have already stocked up on food for Ramadan." However, Hiba's neighbourhood is only getting power for 2 hours a day, which means the food that some families have stored may spoil. It is not clear for how long supplies will have to hold out, given that there's no clear end to the clashes. 2 ceasefires have been announced, but both collapsed as fighting continued between the warring factions. Eyewitnesses reported that in the Khartoum neighbourhoods where fighting has calmed enough for grocery stores to reopen, there are queues and products like bottled water that are scarce. In other, residents are still too afraid to even leave their front door. Residents also reported that some shop owners in the Riyadh neighbourhood, north of the capital, have increased their prices, sometimes charging up to twice the usual amount for eggs, meat and drinks. Some of them double their prices, which is awful, while others are giving some food for free to help people in need, said Shakir, a Khartoum resident. People are getting very angry about it. Shakir said he had heard similar reports of price hikes in other Khartoum neighbourhoods such as Azari, Kafuri and Bari. We are all hoping this conflict will end soon, but stocks are running low, and families should decrease their daily consumption if they want to survive this, he added. Further complicating matters, the UN's World Food Programme, WFP, announced the suspension of aid provision to Sudan on the 16th of April, following the death of 3 of its staff in the region of Darfur. Earlier this year, the UN said that 2/3 of Sudanese, around 15.8 million people, had already needed humanitarian aid in 2023, a situation made worse after international aid from donor countries ceased following the 2021 military coup that ousted civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Abla Kara, a spokesperson for the political coalition known as the Forces for Freedom and Change, expressed her regret at the UN's decision to suspend aid in light of what she called a critical situation. Sudan is already experiencing great economic hardship, and therefore the food stock in homes, no matter how large it is, will not be enough, she said in a statement. Kara also stressed the need for a truce before the country goes into a deep humanitarian crisis. Michael Schumacher's family are planning legal action against a magazine which published an artificial intelligence-generated interview with the former Formula One driver. Schumacher, a 7-time F1 champion, suffered severe head injuries in a skiing accident in December 2013 and has not been seen in public since. Die Aktuell ran a picture of a smiling Schumacher, aged 54, on the front cover of its latest edition with the headline of Michael Schumacher, the first interview. A strapline underneath reads, "It sounded deceptively real," and it emerges in the article that the supposed quotes had been produced by AI. The family have confirmed to news agency Reuters that they are planning to pursue the matter legally. Following his skiing accident, Schumacher was placed into an induced coma and was brought home in September 2014, with his medical condition since kept private by his family. The German won 2 of his F1 World Driver titles, with Benetton in 1994 and 1995, which he claimed 5 in a row for Ferrari from 2000 to 2004. His 7 F1 titles is a record shared jointly with Lewis Hamilton, while Schumacher achieved 91 race wins over his career, a record Hamilton surpassed in 2020. He originally retired from racing in 2006, but returned in 2010 before again retiring 2 years later. Schumacher's son Mick used to drive for Haas in F1 and is currently a reserve driver for Mercedes. In a 2021 Netflix documentary, Schumacher's wife Karina said, "We live together at home, we do therapy, we do everything we can to make Michael better and to make sure he's comfortable and to simply make him feel our family, our bond. We're trying to carry on as a family the way Michael liked it and it still does, and we are getting on with our lives. Private is private, and he always said, it's very important to me that he can continue to enjoy his private life as much as possible. Michael always protected us, and now we are protecting Michael." An Indian court has rejected opposition leader Rahul Gandhi's appeal seeking a stay on his conviction in a criminal defamation case. The decision extends the uncertainty over whether he can contest in national elections due next year. Mr. Gandhi has been sentenced to 2 years in jail for 2019 comments about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's surname at an election rally. He won't be arrested until he has exhausted all legal appeals. Mr. Gandhi's lawyer Kirit Panwala told the BBC that they will challenge the decision in the Gujarat High Court. Mr. Gandhi lost a seat in Parliament a day after his conviction on the 23rd of March due to a Supreme Court order which says that a lawmaker convicted in a crime and sentenced to 2 or more years in jail is disqualified with immediate effect. The Congress has criticised Mr. Gandhi's conviction and accused the governing Bharatiya Janata Party (BJP) of political vendettas. The BJP has denied this, saying that due judicial process was followed in the case. Earlier this month, Mr. Gandhi had filed appeals to suspend his sentence or to secure bail, and to suspend his conviction in a court in Surat. The court had granted Mr. Gandhi bail to appeal against his conviction, but it's the stay or suspension of his conviction that's crucial to reinstating him as an MP. The defamation case against Mr. Gandhi brought by BJP lawmaker Pranesh Modi revolved around comments Mr. Gandhi made in Karnataka state in 2019 during an election rally. Why do all these thieves have Modi as their surname? Nirav Modi, Lalit Modi, Narendra Modi, he said. Nirav Modi is a fugitive Indian diamond tycoon, while Lalit Modi is a former chief of the Indian Premier League who has been banned for life by the country's cricket board. Pranesh Modi, in his complaint, alleged that the comments had defamed the entire Modi community. However, Mr. Gandhi said that he made the comment to highlight corruption, and it was not directed against any community. A mysterious flash which lit up skies. A mysterious flash which lit up skies over Ukraine's capital on Wednesday night generated much speculation. Officials in Kiev initially suspected it was a NASA satellite falling to Earth, but the US Space Agency told the BBC it was still in orbit. Ukrainian space officials said later the flash had probably come up from a meteorite entering the atmosphere. The Air Force was confident it was not a Russian air attack, an event all too familiar since the invasion last year. The bright glow was observed in the sky over the capital around 7 p.m. An air raid alert was activated, but air defense was not in operation, the head of Kiev's military administration, Serhiy Popko, said on Telegram. Mr. Popko suggested it was caused by a NASA space satellite falling to Earth, referring to a retired 300-kilogram spacecraft that the space agency announced was set to re-enter the atmosphere on Wednesday. The RHESSI satellite used to observe solar flares was launched into low Earth orbit in 2002 and decommissioned in 2018, NASA said. But Rob Margetta from NASA's Office of Communications told the BBC that the satellite was still in orbit at the time the flash was observed and was due to re-enter Earth's atmosphere during the night. Satellite tracking website Satflare indicated that RHESSI was nowhere near Ukraine at the time. Ukrainian social media has been awash with theories and memes about what the flash could have been, with the popular theme being that it was caused by aliens. But Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat told Ukrainian TV that the flash had also been seen over neighbouring Belarus to the north, and Ukraine's space agency said it was probably related to a cosmic body entering the dense layers of the atmosphere. Kyiv officials said it was up to experts to establish what it was, but what was most important was the city's security. Two high school cheerleaders were shot after one of them apparently approached the wrong vehicle in a car park near Austin, Texas. One of the athletes, Peyton Washington, 18, remains in hospital in a critical condition, according to family. The other victim was treated at the scene. Their cheer company called the shooting at 12:15 midnight local time on Tuesday horrific. Police charged Pedro Tello Rodriguez Jr., age 25, with deadly conduct. The shooting happened outside a supermarket in Elgin, about 25 miles from Austin. Elgin police said information suggests that an altercation occurred in the parking lot and multiple shots were fired into a vehicle. Members of Miss Washington's cheerleading squad held a prayer vigil on Tuesday night. The team is preparing to compete at the Cheerleading Worlds in Orlando, Florida over the weekend without their teammate. During the ceremony, one of the athletes who was grazed by a bullet in her leg described how quickly the scene unfolded, according to local media. Cheerleader Heather Roth said she got out of her friend's car to get into her own vehicle, but mistakenly picked the wrong car. There was a man in the passenger seat, so she retreated back to her friend's vehicle. I see the guy get out of the passenger door and I rolled my window down and I was trying to apologize to him, and he just threw his hands up and he pulled out a gun and he just started shooting at all of us, she said. The Woodlands Elite Generals cheerleading team has organised a GoFundMe page for Miss Washington's medical expenses. The fundraiser says she was shot twice and badly injured. Lynn Shearer, the owner of the team, said that the group of 4 girls were carpooling home after practice when the shooting occurred. She told CBS News, the BBC's US partner, that Miss Washington's spleen ruptured and her pancreas and diaphragm were also damaged. Her father, Keelan Washington, told NBC News that the 18-year-old was in a stable condition, but critical condition after being flown by helicopter to a hospital where doctors removed her spleen. Peyton's accomplished everything she has with only one lung from when she was born. She's as tough as they come, he told the outlet. Miss Washington is due to start at Baylor University this fall, where she'll compete for the school's acrobatics and tumbling team. V. Melky, Baylor's head coach, urged the community to pray for Miss Washington and her family as she recovers. "We love you and we look forward to seeing you soon," she tweeted. The suspect was captured after his vehicle license plate number was traced. A convenience store manager also witnessed the shooting, according to court documents. The incident is one in a string of shootings this week involving young Americans who are reported to have mistakenly approached the wrong person or home. In New York State, 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis was shot and killed on Saturday after a friend accidentally drove down the wrong driveway. Last Thursday in Missouri, 16-year-old Ralph Yarl was shot in the head and arm when he rang the doorbell at the wrong address. Okay, so that's all the news for the moment. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to watch the other videos I've got on the channel. I'm sure there'll be something you'll find of interest. And don't forget to subscribe.